The discussion which I recently hosted here on the channel regarding the major issues with Gran Turismo 7 got me to thinking, why not do more community-based discussions like that, some multi-part videos wherein we open the discussion, give our thoughts in the comments, and then revisit it with kind of a collation of those thoughts put together, regarding not just the negative stuff, the issues, the problems, but also good stuff as well, such as on this occasion, you'll have seen from the thumbnail and from the title, our favourite vehicles of the entire series, not just Gran Turismo 7, and of course much of this will have very much to do with when you entered the series, what game you first entered with, if you've even played all of them, so each of our lists could be very different. And this was also partially inspired by the multiple polls which I've been putting up on the community section of the channel recently regarding some of our favourite circuits in terms of wanting them to come back, regardless of whether or not they will. So for this one, there are two things really. You could keep it to just one vehicle, because ultimately I really do want to see what the consensus is, if there is any, in terms of a most popular car for all of the Gran Turismo series, but we're going to stretch it to a top 10. Even for me, getting it down to a top 10 was very difficult, so we're going to say up to 10 cars, because otherwise, obviously, it could be endless. You could either pick your just favourite car from the whole series, or you could do a top 10. And like I said, it can be through all of the games, as mine are. In terms of the criteria, it can be literally anything. It could be nostalgia, it could be a car that you just have good memories of, tying into that nostalgia. It could be something that you just find yourself enjoying driving more than anything else, or it could be something which maybe you enjoy because you've won loads of races with it, or find it something particularly useful in a certain kind of event. It could be any criteria, just whatever defines your favourites. And like I said, for me it was very difficult to narrow it down to 10. I had something like 35, 36 vehicles, and getting rid of a lot of them really was difficult for me. So these are my 10 picks. Tell me yours down in the comments, and then we'll revisit this in a part 2 to see what the most popular ones, and of course this is only a very small sampling of the community as a whole, but just to get some kind of idea what the favourite cars of many people are from all of Gran Turismo's history. The first one for me, and these are in no particular order, is actually probably an unexpected one for many, the Daihatsu Sirian rally car, or the Daihatsu Storia rally car from Gran Turismo 2. The reason why I'm placing this one on the list is multifaceted. For one thing, it's nostalgic. I remember loving the car as a kid. I first got into Gran Turismo with the second game when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I believe, and this one just immediately jumped out to me. I loved how small and like a little pit bull of power it was with about 400 horses, and it was also quite an overlooked car, I feel, by many members in the community. The reason why I extend that love even further, to the point of putting it in my top 10, is because not only did it sow the seeds for my later love of one of my favourite Japanese cars, the Storia Cross 4, which is essentially like a road-going version of this idea, but also, of course, I now own a Daihatsu Sirian Rally 2, which is a direct result of this childhood love. With so many of the cars that I've bought, it has been because of games, so of course I have to include this one on the list. The next one I feel like a number of people might include in their top 10, and there are technically two primary variants of it, depending on which one you might choose. The Lister Storm. For me, I absolutely adore the Lister Storm road car, again from Gran Turismo 2. In real life even, it's one of the coolest supercars, and certainly one of the most uniquely styled supercars ever made. In the series, of course, we've mostly seen the Storm in its racing form, as recently as Gran Turismo 6, and I don't necessarily hold out too much hope to see it coming back anytime soon, which is unfortunate, but even though the race car was always far too heavy, I still loved it. It was one of those cars, like another one which of course I'll talk about later on, which I picked just because I liked it, not because it was ever the best anything. So like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if I see the Lister Storm popping up for a few other people as well. The next one is, although out of order, my pick for the number 1. This is my absolute favourite car if I could only choose one, easily, and without really any need for a second thought, my favourite car of the entire Gran Turismo franchise. Most of you, if you know the channel, already know what it is. Of course, I've got a model car of it looking at me right now on the shelf, the Renault Espace F1. Again from Gran Turismo 2, just the most insane car in my opinion of the whole series, something which can even outclass the legendary Escudo in terms of craziness, and yeah, I love the Espace. To me that would be incredible if it ever came back. I don't realistically think that it will. Closest thing we'll probably get is the Alphard with the V10 engine from the Lexus LFA, but yeah, the Espace F1, of course, I've talked about it at length on the channel in various videos. That's my number 1 for sure. The next one though, speaking of number 1s, this, although not my favourite car of the entire series, is legitimately one of my favourite cars in real life as well. And in my opinion, controversial as it might be, I actually believe this is the single most beautiful car of all time, the Shelby Daytona Cobra. And the funny thing is, back in Gran Turismo 2, I didn't really care at all about this car. I never used it, I never really cared for it. I liked the normal Cobra because it was very eye-catching for a kid. This one, though, really came into its own for me in Gran Turismo 6. I really fell in love with this car around 2013, 2014 when GT6 came out, and I've adored it ever since. I think it's an absolutely stunning shape. I've had the pleasure of speaking via email to Peter Brock, who designed this car, and of course a number of other vehicles which I spoke about in Unsung Heroes, such as the Hino BRE Samurai, etc. And yeah, it's just an absolutely stunning machine. I always love driving it in Gran Turismo, and in the later games, the better graphics, the better sound, it just makes it even more of an enjoyable experience. The next one, much like the Lister Storm, I do believe could well be on many people's lists, wouldn't surprise me at all. Definitely one of the signature cars from Gran Turismo's past, in particular, the TVR Speed 12. Interestingly, my favourite version is again from Gran Turismo 2, which is the super rare first generation Speed 12, which you could turn into the white and blue race car, which was seen, I believe, relatively briefly on a very old school Top Gear, with Clarkson driving the car. The later Speed 12 is awesome too, but overall, the Speed 12 is such a cool supercar. It's a legendary speed machine, I absolutely love it. And I actually got the chance to see the Lister Storm and the Speed 12, the only road-going version, that iconic red one, both at the same time parked next to each other at Goodwood last time I went, which was an incredible experience. The next one is the car which I was alluding to when I spoke about the Lister Storm. I always put this car in the same camp because it's not the most obvious of race cars, but it's always there on the grid, and it's way too heavy compared to what it should be, the Panos GTR1, or as they call it in the game, the Panos Esperante GTR1. I adore Panos. They are probably the racing team, the racing brand, whatever you want to call them, that I would support the most in everything they do. I absolutely love all of their vehicles. I love how unabashedly wacky they are, and the fact that it's the only car we've ever had in the series kind of means that I love it by default. It's actually not a bad car to work with either, it's just not quite as sharp as the other more iconic Group Cs, GT1s and LMPs, much like the Lister Storm because of its weight. 1150 kilos is far too high. Maybe if it were the Sparky hybrid version, then perhaps, but yeah, Panos is one of those companies that has much more innovation than people give them credit for. For example, the Delta Wing. That was a Panos design which Nissan tried to steal. The next one I feel like again will probably be on many people's lists. This is a legendary car. Back when I used to play Gran Turismo 4 with my dad, he used to have nicknames for various vehicles, and the nickname for this one was the Fridge, because it is, of course, the Chaparral 2J. One of the most iconic Can-Am cars, one of the most iconic Gran Turismo cars, and it's done a really good job of being so iconic, considering it's only been in the series since GT4, so it's not like it's an OG vehicle. It left such an immediate mark for how crazy good it was, and although it's not quite as OP in the current form in Gran Turismo 7 because of being more realistic, even with the more realistic physics, it's still incredible for a classic machine. In fact, one of my real-world dream projects would be to build a road-going replica of a Chaparral 2J. I'd have to make some changes. Obviously, the fans wouldn't work and it would have to have hidden lights to be road legal, but I would love to build a road-going version of one of these. So yeah, I feel like that one will most likely pop up a few times at least for many people. The next one, on the other hand, is completely the opposite, because I'm probably one of the very few people to put this in their top 10. The Mini Marcos. I absolutely adore Marcos as a brand. I love them even more than TVR, because to me they're kind of like TVR, but they get less credit for it. And the Mini Marcos is, again, one of my dream classics. I'm yet to sit in one. I've said that a number of times, so I don't actually know if I'd fit in it, but I'm really hoping that I do, because it's one of my dream bucket list cars to own, or at the very least to review at some point. So yeah, the Mini Marcos is just one of those cars which, to go back to my definitions of favourites, this is always a car which, when I go back to the older games just for the sake of playing it, it's always one of the go-to vehicles for me. I just like to get the chance to drive the Mini Marcos again. It's just a fun little experience. My next pick is another one which I think will be pretty popular. I could definitely see another vehicle which I initially had on my list, but I ended up cutting it out. Spoiler alert, the Minolta, which is one of my favourites, but not quite in my top 10. This one, though, definitely is. It's my favourite Group C machine, and of course we have it back now in Gran Turismo 7 in full HD glory, the Nissan R92CP. The most powerful Group C car ever in qualifying trim, an incredible looking shape. I remember when, again, I used to play Gran Turismo 4 with my dad. Of course, it made its debut in that game, alongside the even less appreciated R89C, and we initially didn't like the R92. It was kind of a weird car, it bounced around all over the place down the Mulsanne Straight, but once you mastered it, It really was an absolute speed demon. It destroyed other vehicles in that kind of era, and even newer ones as well. And at the time, I didn't know anywhere near as much about cars, of course, so we didn't understand the intricacies of what Group C really was and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's an enduring legend for me. I absolutely adore this car. It's not conventionally pretty, but I do love the way it looks. And for those keeping count, which is probably nobody, but the final one is not going to make any sense to anyone, I don't think, and I would be stunned if this is in anyone's top 10, but this, to me, in a funny kind of way, is actually the epitome, even more so than the Marcos, of a car in Gran Turismo, which I go in and drive it purely for the enjoyment of just driving a vehicle. This is a vehicle which I did not love as a kid. It was introduced, I believe, in Gran Turismo 4. I took no notice of it back then whatsoever. Neither did I in Gran Turismo 5. I only noticed it really in Gran Turismo 6. And it's a car which my own Lincoln Premier has some similar styling to, with the slanted headlights. And it is the BLRA-3 Skyline, known in real life as the Prince Skyline Coupe, the classic two-door, very American almost looking Skyline. There's something about this vehicle which I just love. I love the design, I love how unexpected it is to have it in a game, Gran Turismo or otherwise. I love how completely different to every other Skyline it is, and just how it captures the magic of just pottering around in a classic car, something that I would absolutely love to get the chance to drive in real life. I can't really explain it in any more in-depth way than that. It's just one of those cars which I personally believe more so in my adult life than when I was a kid, so kind of the opposite to nostalgia, has actually really tied into why I love classic cars more than modern cars in real life as well. There's just something about a classic which keeps my attention more. They have more personality, more charisma, more of a story to tell. There's something charming about a classic car, and one as beautiful as this, well, just even more so, it really appeals to me. But probably a weird pick for many people, and like I said, I doubt many people would have that. So that would be it for my 10. And now we get to your 10. So I will of course be checking through the comments. If you want to only pick one, you could go for 1, you could go 5, you could go 10, but I'm very curious to see which ends up being the most commonly picked vehicles. And it's a shame that more people won't get the chance to see the video in the community as a whole, for a number of reasons, you know, the algorithm, some people just don't like the channel, whatever. But the more people you get answering it, the more comprehensive the answers will be in terms of just how popular each machine is. I think some of the ones which we can assume are going to be on the list, and even some of these were ones which didn't make the shortlist for me, were vehicles like the GT40, the Lotus Elise GT1, the Suzuki Escudo, and for me more so the Suzuki Cultus, undoubtedly the Toyota GT1, Mazda 787B. For me, I almost had the Vectors and the Venturis on the list, all ones which didn't quite make it into my absolute favourites, but they are definitely some of my favourite cars overall, certainly if you were to extend it to a top 30. But that's it for my absolute top 10. Tell me yours down below, and of course in future, maybe not next week, perhaps the week after, we'll revisit this and see what the consensus was in terms of which ones were mentioned the most and the most popular. But that's it for this video. I'll see you next time with more, and for now, thanks for watching.